I'm here with Maximo Bottaro from Reforest Now, who's going to tell us all about tree planting, tree growing, and bush regeneration.
Started with Greenpeace, went to Rainforest Rescue, then spent a long time at university doing science degrees and genetics research into rainforest, and then worked in Rainforest Trust, and then one day just went, with a guy I'd been working with for over 10 years, Michael Martin, the co-founder. We just said, let's just do it. Let's just do our own thing, uninhibited, get the most outcome, just start our own thing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so today, Reforest Now, I believe, does tree growing, tree planting, bush regeneration, has a nursery that's about 1 hectare.
Yeah.
Has donors in 40 countries.
Probably a bit more now, yeah.
And is already considered as a medium-sized charity, even though you were born in 2018. And you have 16 staff. You want to tell us about your staff?
Yeah, well, look, the staffing's really broad. So, we do everything in-house, and I think that is why we're a medium-sized charity already in just 2 years. I mean, that's from the registration, that's from the high hopes, no logo or anything yet, it's from that point. So what we did that I think was smart was kind of simple. We just did everything ourselves. So we've got our own social media, our own grant writers, our own scientists, our own seed collectors, nursery people, builders, tree planters, rainforest regenerators, just everything, administration, we do everything ourselves. So that's allowed us to employ a lot of people, and that is ultimately the goal of Reforest Now, is to employ a lot of people, because everything else is beyond that, beyond getting a lot of people.
Do you also have a lot of volunteers who work with you?
Well, we had heaps, we had at least 20 a week in the nursery, and we had over 100 coming to plantings. But look, after COVID, we just thought it's too messy to get back into volunteerism now. So we've just left it. And one positive of that is that it's been able to create more stable employment for people, which is it's like an obsession of mine, is how to create more stable employment for people.
Absolutely. I think it must have paid off to have a really good team, because I heard that you had a partnership with Ecology, the search engine at the moment.
Yeah, I think what happened there was they heard about the bushfires in Australia. They hadn't ever had a project here.
Right.
Never done that. And I think they were looking at organisations, and they just liked the look of us, and they contacted us. And I think Ecology is really savvy on the science, and they're also savvy on the dishonesty that can occur in any large-scale industry, including tree planting. So I think that they'd seen people that were taking money and not actually doing what they said they were doing, and so on. So they looked at the way that we ran our organisation, which is like aggressively honest. Like every little thing we do, we say where it is, what GPS, what polygon, who it was for. Not many people are doing that. So I think that's why we got Ecology.
Right, you're referencing data strongly.
Yeah, obsessively, because if I go to a big tree planting company's website, I often can't see a single tree where it was planted, and I'm like, how are you getting millions of dollars? You're not accounting for anything.
Right.
We account for everything.
Okay, beautiful. So without further ado, this is what I want to discuss in this interview. As every FutureSeeds interview, we discuss the problems and then we discuss the solutions. So the problems I want to speak about with you is, I want to talk about the bushfires in Australia, of course. I want to talk about loss in biodiversity. I want to talk about global warming. I want to talk about decrease in rainfall.
Got a bit to say about that one, yeah.
Yeah, because I watched your video on the bacteria and the Bio Precipitation. We'll be talking about that.
Yeah.
But first, maybe a quick summary of those issues. What you'd have to say about all those issues. First of all, are they related? Are they linked?
Yep. Yes. Sure, other things feed into them, but yeah, they're all linked. And we could do that one by one if you're interested. Or
yeah, let's start with decrease in rainfall then.
How is it linked to?
Bushfires, global warming, loss in biodiversity.
Oh, right. Well, if you get reduced rainfall, it's easier for fire to start, right?
Yeah.
So that's what happened to us in 2019. Rainforest that normally is able to maintain its own microclimate because of the canopy and the soil, everything about rainforest is fire protective. The vines stop the wind coming in. The moist forest floor is like the darkest forest floor of any forest type is rainforest. So it's moist. So even if embers are flicked in from bushfires far away, they might not even get through the canopy.
Right.
And if they do, they're not going to light in the dark in the wet leaves, where it's cold and wet. And yeah, there's a lot of reasons why the forest doesn't burn. At least half the species have complex biological responses to fire that stop them from burning or from being completely killed, or the timber is, in at least half cases of species type, the timber is not really effective at lighting and staying lit and passing the fire on and so on, and creating that flash, that power that spreads it. So there's that. Loss of biodiversity is always going to happen when you have wildfires, ravaging around. I mean, I think, I've heard from several organisations in the last, say, 6 months who've been trying to find out if their endangered species is now going to go extinct or if half of them are missing or so on. So the bushfires are definitely a threat to biodiversity. In the Australian landscape, bushfires have contracted the presence of rainforest, but you imagine in the Australian landscape, the rainforest is in all sorts of funny shapes based on mountains where it's going to catch the wet air rising off the ocean and rain and so on. So the rainforest was in all strange shapes around the landscape. And if you just imagine it with your, digitally in your mind, you just imagine it contracting. If it has this odd shape, they can contract and break apart just from the Australian burning of the forest, the eucalyptus forest. So then you end up with these fragmented patches, and then they're going to get burnt all the way around the edge when they're fragmented off. So when the fire ecosystem is going to spread into there, and then when it burns, it's going to burn from all sides and continue to crush those remnants. So, we've lost a lot of remnants that way, but yeah, continue, please.
And finally, global warming, is it linked to all this?
Directly. Yeah, directly. The thing to remember about global warming that's been said continuously since 1991, when Carl Sagan first presented, to world-leading scientists, long before it was really believed by anybody. And I remember, because I was campaigning against global warming in 2001 in Melbourne, and I remember talking to thousands of people who didn't believe it. So back in 1991, they knew well back then that the thing that you shouldn't forget is that climate change is going to cause more extreme weather. So that could be hot, that could be cold, that could be hurricanes, but it's just going to be, a less stable Earth. And that's, I think, what people often forget. Neil deGrasse Tyson said it like this. He said, climate, following what's happening with the climate is like a man and a dog walking on the beach. The dog is going to wave left and right, and you're going to say, oh, but it's colder than usual this month. Maybe climate change isn't real. The dog's going to wander on the leash, but watch the trend. And the trend is that there's more extreme weather events. So, what happened in 2019? No, not normal. Not normal at all. We're meant to get 1,800 millimeters of rain a year. We got 770 or something. It's completely insane. We should never have anything like that.
The decrease in rainfall all over the territory. I remember going to a conference here by Will Steffen, and he was explaining how the currents change in the ocean. And because of that, it's raining in the ocean now rather than raining in the big farming belt in south of Australia. Is that also a contributing factor?
We should have a pen. Okay, so there's 3 things to think of there. One is, if you look at the NOAA website and you look at their heat maps of rainfall over the Earth, the Amazon's being deforested aggressively and has been for some decades, right? There's a belt of rainfall that comes off the Amazon and it heads southeast, and that rains across the bottom of WA and across South Australia into Tasmania and Victoria. You can actually see it spraying this jet of water across the Earth and then down to Antarctica. So first of all, that's reducing. The other one is that deforestation was measured as far back as the 1980s in Victoria and determined to be reducing the rainfall at that time by 18%. So they already knew 30 years ago or 40 years ago that deforestation in Australia was reducing the rainfall, and they kept logging it, reducing the total cover. Now, in terms of weather systems, their behaviour, the reason the ocean changes so much is because when you heat up the Earth, the ocean first responds by absorbing some of that water. It's just the chemistry and the physics of the process is the ocean takes the first hit and it heats up. So that's why we've had really serious career science, climate science people have looked at the ocean, and that's where they've been getting a lot of their data, saying, hey, stop worrying about air temperature or surface temperature, look at the ocean heating up. And when the ocean heats up, all of these belts that we understand that travel around the Earth, through the Earth's oceans for thousands of years, they're going to change their behavior.
So much so that when we actually speak about trying to limit the increase of temperature on the planet to, let's say, 2 degrees, it's increasing by far more in the ocean, isn't it?
Well, I'd have to check the figures, but the way to say it, that I'm confident to say it, is the ocean will change more significantly before the rest of the planet does, and those effects are going to be very hard to come back from, because we live on a planet where we understand a lot of the paleology, the ancient history of the place, and our oceans have been pretty toxic in the past, and if we don't want to go back there, because if the oceans start to change, if they get too acidic and too hot.
What do you mean by in the past?
Well, going back 1.5 billion years.
Right.
So the Earth's 3/4 of its history, you didn't want to be in the ocean, put it that way. Basically, I would really be concerned if the ocean had a runaway effect. Yeah, and that would bother me more than what's happening on the surface.
Right. All right, with all of this happy information, let's move to the solutions.
Yeah.
All right, let's start with tree growing and tree planting. That seems to be a solution that a lot of organizations and a lot of countries in the world are attracted to. And I'd like to hear from you why and all that. But there is, from what I understand, tree planting the right way and tree planting the wrong way.
The right way is to collect from enough parent trees per species so that you don't get inbreeding. So the simple way to think of it is we know what inbreeding does in humans in just one generation of it. Brother and sister, the genetic effect to the child. Trees are DNA based, humans are DNA based. We're eukaryotic, they're eukaryotic. We are symbiotic with mitochondria, they're symbiotic with mitochondria. There's plenty in common. And it's a simple way to just understand that if people go and do large-scale reforestation and they don't collect enough genetic diversity, they'll plant 1 million trees that are all from a couple of parent trees. They're all going to be brother and sister, so to speak. And it looks fine, and they'll grow big and healthy, and then they pollinate. Right? And then they breed, and the second generation of trees are going to come up, and they're all going to be of, they may, if the gene pool has some problems in it, which it probably does, if it used to be a very big species with a lot of numbers, if it's contracted down, like a lot of things on the Earth have been, all those brother and sister trees are going to breed, and then you're going to have genetic problems, and they're going to get worse in the F2 generation, as in the next generation and the next generation. So some things will go extinct because of the way we're doing it. We're going to send them extinct ourselves. There's a lot to say on this topic, so I've written a book on it, and so I'll probably skip that now. If anyone wants to see more on that, there's a
let's just try and say.
All right, go on.
Let's just try and say. How do you plant a good forest? I know this concept of spacing of species, different species, layering, having microorganisms in there for regenerating the soil, mulch against evaporating. What can you tell us?
Oh, and this more basic, in the more summary. So, to look at what's going to be able to reclaim the landscape from what was already there. So not to use eucalyptus to take the Himalayas, to look at let's say a rainforest hill that goes into a creek, and say, okay, we're going to plant a mix of things to reclaim this hill. It's a bit drier than the trees that would have liked to have lived there before when it was forested. It's going to need slightly drier, tolerant species to reclaim it, and more pioneers. So basically, when you plant a forest, you've got to have pioneers that are fast growing, fast fruiting, fast dying. And then there's what's called early secondaries, which are a bit slower growing, a bit slower fruiting, a bit bigger, and they might live for 50 years or something. And then there's late secondaries and then mature phase. And at the mature phase end, you're talking about trees that could live for 800 years.
So when you're planting a forest, you got to be present for all those 3 phases and introducing new species?
What we do is we go in first, we put in a mix of all 4.
All right.
So we'll put maybe 30% pioneers to make sure that they come up quickly and make a canopy to shade out the grass and to support the other trees. And then, so there'll be a mix of all 4. So there won't be too many mature phase because they're not very helpful with building a forest. They need, 10 years before they're going to be anything interesting. You got me? So yeah, we put that mix in. We put some shrubs in. Shrubs are important. A lot of bush regenerators don't bother, but they're important because, if you have like this big bunching lamandra grass, you've got to think about all the insects that are going to live there and, the shading of the soil layer and so on. So you think there is so much biological activity that can happen if the soil isn't being cooked by the sun all the time. Because first of all, the sun sterilizes everything because it's got UV. You can kill Ebola with the sun.
Kill a what?
Ebola.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You kill HIV with the sun. Like, it's powerful, right? It's putting out UV and worse. So, as much as you can bring back some layers is best, but you don't put vines in to a regenerating forest. You put them into one that's maybe 10 years old and with a consistent canopy. Because if there's breaks in the canopy, you're going to kill it with vines because they'll just climb up, cover the whole tree and kill it. So the vines we bring in later, we tend to plant vines for endangered species, primarily for like pink underwing moths and birdwing, Richmond birdwing butterflies and so on. Some shrubs. We definitely think it's important to use shrubs that retain banks and so on, and think of shrubs that feed the native birds. We do something a bit unusual, which is we drill our holes for our trees down about this deep. So what's that, like 40 centimeters? And then we basically make up a goo with water crystals. So this is basically a chemical that absorbs water and holds it for a long time. And we put it like more than this, we put 600 mils in the bottom of a hole. And inside it, it's clear jelly, right? Like this. And inside it, there's just fertilizer just sitting inside, suspended in it. And it's slow release. So we put that right down the bottom of the hole. We put some of the stem of the tree in the hole so that the roots are below the level of the weeds.
Yeah.
So because the roots of the weeds are up here, so we want our roots down there. So it's colder, so it's wetter and colder, and they're not competing with the weeds so much. So we put our tree in the ground with a little bit of the stem inside the ground because they don't care. Rainforest trees don't care they're not going to rot.
Yeah.
So they're in deeper, they're going to get a better start. They've got this reservoir of wet stuff. And then every time it rains, that wet stuff rehydrates and they're just drinking all the time. They grow really fast. We've got trees in 6 months that are over 1 meter tall, which is just 6 months since they were planted from the nursery. So it's really effective to bury them deep, have the stuff down there. And every time it rains and the jelly swells up again, the slow release fertilizers we use leaks a bit more out when it rehydrates. So it only gives the tree fertilizer when it's wet. So they're not getting fertilizer when they're just trying to hold on and survive in the dry.
Yeah.
So it's like the right timing. Mulching we do if it's affordable, but we're trying to do this cheaply. We're doing rainforest at $5 a tree. The landowner almost never pays for that, but we're trying to bring the price right down and do it at a bigger scale because the industry standard is something like $10 a tree in this area, and it can be as much as 25 or 30. And if you want to plant out hectares, you can't do that. So we also try to automate the whole process by having 4-wheel drives moving through the site. So all the plants, the pot never leaves the trailer. We're tapping them off, putting them in buckets. People are putting them straight in the holes. The crystals and the jelly and the fertilizer, that's all coming straight off trailers and vehicles. All the machinery that drills the holes, it's mounted on the vehicles, taken off, put back on. So we basically move through, get it done really efficiently, and we've been able to do a lot more work by doing it based on vehicles rather than having people trekking around all over the place.
Right. How many trees have you planted to this day?
Well, 45,600.
In this area?
In this, 10,000 in the Daintree, more or less.
In the Daintree forest, all right.
Yeah, so between the Atherton Tablelands, Mossman, Myallo, Daintree, Cape Tribulation, across all of that, 10,000 up there.
Daintree must be a different type of tree, I imagine.
Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you? It's 10 times the diversity of trees. So we've got 290 tree and shrub species. The Daintree has 3,000. But you see a lot of the same stuff.
That's another thing. Like, I was listening to this podcast, and they were saying, well, the guy's actually called Shubhendu Sharma, he does a lot of work in India. He's big over there. And he's saying, like, they have about 2,800 types of trees in India, but most people doing bush regeneration and tree planting over there only plant about 100 of those species. He was saying there's a bit lack in the diversity of the trees planted.
Look, I mean, in the grand scale of what I've heard, that's pretty good.
Is it?
Yeah. Like we, in the Daintree, we probably plant, 120 species in one planting. So maybe 200 out of 2,000. Because the forest is so intact, it's going to put them back anyway. It's so easy to reforest in the Daintree. You don't really have to do anything. You just put up a tarp maybe, you know.
Yes.
But down here we plant most of the 290 species. Most of them.
That's pretty good.
The problem is that there's a hell of a lot of projects that only plant 5 or 10. That's bad.
Yeah, okay. So he's planted this beautiful forest, and he was talking about global warming. He said just outside the forest it was 43 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
Inside the forest, 28.
Yeah.
Just a few meters inside the forest, just at the entrance, it was already 28 degrees.
Yeah.
So planting trees as a solution to global warming.
Look, it's the easiest of all the solutions because the public will isn't there to shift over to nuclear fission. As in nuclear we already have, not the nuclear we're developing. So nobody wants to do that, and that would have been the easiest way to cut down carbon. The next one is planting trees is basically putting the earth back the way it was would theoretically fix the balance of what's in the atmosphere and the ocean and the earth and put everything back in harmony. So that is a big part of what we need to do is put all the forest back as much as we can. The earth took, you got to remember, from the development of terrestrial life, so like less than 400 million years ago, and when our ancestors came onto the ground, to the earth, the Acanthosteris, the 7-fingered fish that could wobble its way up on there, and then there was a species that could lay on the land. So in that time, that less than 400 million years, the earth has changed a lot and stabilized, and it's stabilized by where the weather is distributed, where the forests are distributed, how the atmosphere is balanced with gases and carbon and so on, and what's happened in the ocean. Like, the earth is stabilized by biology, and that's happened in our cycle. We're part of a cycle of the earth, and it's done a whole lot of crazy stuff before. The earth's been a violent, dangerous place for billions of years, and now we're in this relative period of peace. So putting the forest back will help restore that peace. But this is the next stage, it's not enough to do that or to consider a better fuel source like nuclear fusion, which is the much better option. It's not enough to do any of this because we've now pumped all these fossil fuels into the atmosphere that aren't in any of that equation I just talked about. You put all the forest back, you've still got all this crap in the atmosphere because it was buried for a very long time.
Which is why people are talking about carbon sequestration now.
BECCS technologies, yeah. We've got to figure out a way to get it out of the atmosphere. First of all, finding ways to capture carbon out of industry and pumping it underground so it never goes up. We have to do that. But then we've also got to do some crazy space age technology to get it out of the atmosphere. So planting trees won't be enough to do all of that. It'll be enough to do some of that. That's a bit scary because what we're going to have to do as a species based on the technology we have now is basically we're going to have to look at our population's use of resources per person. We're going to have to reforest as much as we can. We're going to have to consider an alternate fuel system because wind and solar aren't going to cut it unless we really control the way people live, and geothermal and so on. We really would have to change everything. So unless we're going to use one of the nuclears, we're going to have to look at what the population does with power. So I don't mean the number of people, I mean the number of people times the number of power each person uses.
Yeah,
So
like
you've got to have to play with that.
If everyone lived like, I think like an American, we need 4 planets. As a Victorian, we need 6 planets, something like that.
Yeah, well, Australia's concrete is a big problem with our carbon footprint. But
Yeah, okay.
so you've got all of those issues. Now, the way I see it is, if we're lucky, we'll do as much of all of that right as possible, slow down climate change, and then hopefully it doesn't go too wild on the planet and freak us out too much. But hopefully, if we do all of those things somewhat right, somewhere down the line, we'll find a way to suck it out, suck the carbon out of the atmosphere and the methane. The methane worries me a lot more because, each molecule of methane is 23 times more heat creating for the Earth than each molecule of carbon.
Right.
And it has a short half-life, but I reckon we could find a way to knock the methane out of the atmosphere. That'd be a good start.
Is methane mainly from cows?
I don't know what ratio of it in the atmosphere comes from cows, but I imagine it's significant. But I imagine that there's also melting permafrosts. So across the north of the planet, across those ancient forests that have been frozen for thousands of years, all of that permafrost is melting, and that decomposing plant materials releasing methane into the atmosphere. Very scary, right? So we can't stop that. We could reduce the amount of cows we have, but industry produces tons of methane as well.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So, I'm not exactly sure what the ratio is between industry and cows, but they're both things we're going to have to work on. That's, I think, the most immediate threat is to, first, there's so much we can do from all those things we talked about. Then we can try to figure out a way to immediately cut the methane out of the atmosphere. That'd be a very good move.
It would. Let's move into biodiversity, because I know you wrote a big resource on endangered species. Let's talk about biodiversity of plants and animals, and then segue into bush regeneration. So biodiversity, first of all, why is it so important to protect biodiversity?
We don't really understand ecology. We talk about it a bit, but we don't. That's for AI to figure out. Humans haven't really got that one under control. We understand biology pretty well, which is, this organ system, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. We kind of got that figured out. Ecology's way harder to study. It's like, the frog that has the fungus on its back legs that lives in that swamp, and that fungus is the only way that this orchid can germinate because it does something to the seed, and that orchid does this, has this pollen that attracts this. Ecology is a really nasty topic.
Right.
So if you lose your biodiversity, you might lose some chains in your web of life. And you lose a chain that you might have no idea that it does anything, and you might lose a bunch of species.
Like,
and then
we
bunch
understand
more.
losing bees. That's one thing we're like, whoa, this is going to be a big problem.
That's the simplest.
Yeah.
But there's going to be worse stuff than that. As in less visible and hard hitting.
I apologize for my ignorance, but how do you classify a weed, and how do you classify a native species?
Oh, this is a great topic. Well, put it this way, for a start, about half of all the Australian rainforest stuff isn't from Gondwana, right? Gondwana, the continent before Australia, like what we came from. About half of the species in our rainforest came from the Indo-Malaysian forests. And you can tell, by the way, they look completely different. They got a lot of them have wider timber and way bigger leaves. They're from tropical rainforest. They've come down to us. So, a whole lot of that stuff's not native. Native when they
That's
integrated.
what I'm asking. What is there a threshold, or what is it?
Oh man, the threshold is before Europeans got here. That's it.
Okay.
That's the threshold.
Right.
Before people started studying it. But look, there's other parameters to consider. If something comes from overseas, does it spread to huge numbers and push other things out of the habitat? Is it toxic to wildlife here, or is it toxic to horses and cattle more so? Because that's what they're more worried about when they say something's a weed.
Okay.
They go, that's a weed because it kills horses, it makes them sick, Then, but look, then you got species that naturalize. So, there are species that come from maybe a different part of Australia or maybe from overseas, and they just integrate into the forest and don't cause trouble. So an example of that is Schliflera actinophylla. It's called the umbrella tree. It's got these big, beautiful spreads of red fruit. Came from the Mossman Gorge in North Queensland. It's down here. It lives in perfect harmony with the forest here, but people still kill it because it's a weed. But I'm telling you, in over a decade of working around it, there's nothing wrong with that species being here, and it came from North Queensland. So
the lines are blurry, definitely, between native species, weed, or good plant.
They're conservative. The lines are conservative.
Okay.
Yeah, because if it stuffs up, you could get camphor laurel. You know, you don't know which species is going to become camphor laurel or which one's going to become lantana.
What's the issue with camphor laurel?
Well, it's a complicated one, but it's not all bad. But camphor came from China. They planted a couple of them in a few places, and then now it's, if you get in a helicopter, like I did a few months ago, it's all you can see from the sky.
Right.
Yeah. You know, it's yeah.
That kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Australia's interesting for that. I'm not from Australia, so I've discovered a lot of interesting issues here. Like the first time that I heard that cats were not welcome here, which is I guess it's the case everywhere. They kill a lot, but I've never heard it like here in Australia, where people keep their cats inside because they will kill native animals.
Yeah.
So I've never even really paid attention to the distinction between native and not native, having been brought up in France.
Well, that's a really simple example.
Yeah.
There's a thing that happens in nature called convergent evolution. So in different ecosystems, there's going to basically be some amount of similarity in the structure. You know, like a forest is a forest, so to speak, right? And in many different places, you'll get something like a dog evolve. And we don't know most of the names of them because we live in Australia, but there's all sorts of things like dogs in different forests around the world. And there's all sorts of things like cats or types of cats in forests around the world. Problem with Australia is that its evolution was cut off from the rest of the world for a very long time. So particularly for the animals. So the ecosystem here was very vulnerable to a feline being brought into it. So it had evolved completely differently to many other forest types around the world that had those. We had a dog-like creature, yeah. We had a thylacine, which was outcompeted by a brother of convergent evolution. You know, like the dingo or the dog. Like,
yeah.
So it's basically when evolution makes the same kind of thing and puts it in different places. It's really interesting that it does it so much. But Australia was not ready for cats. Not the way the birds live, not the way anything lives. They weren't ready. Yeah.
Just an hour from here, you can get a $50,000 fine for having a rabbit.
Yeah, well, there's another one that Australia wasn't ready for. You know.
Let's talk about bush regeneration and its link to the bushfires that happen. Can bush regeneration be actually called? Can it be called a measure to mitigate bushfires?
Well, it's pretty easy to answer that here. It's different for everyone. The bigger a piece of rainforest is, the more moisture it retains. Rainforest is really good at that, right? So if our forest here was broader and more intact, we would have taken less damage from the bushfire season, because they would have retained more water, they would have recycled more clouds, the creeks would have been more active, more like the whole area would have been moister.
As soon as I hear that, you know, forests are maybe like too patchy or something,
yeah,
I think about roads cutting through forests. We have the highway here that's just this big thing cutting through the whole of the coast. Is that an issue you can solve?
Well, look, the first thing that comes to mind when you mention the way roads break up the landscape is it confuses the hell out of people who are meant to manage the pyrolytic forests, the ones that are meant to burn, because sometimes you put a road in and the fire doesn't get across the road anymore, like the low burning, the lower level bushfire, natural one. So sometimes that doesn't get across the road anymore, and you know what happens? You get rainforest on the other side. And then people go in and cut down the rainforest because they say, well, this is meant to be a eucalyptus area. So you create a disturbance in the landscape like a road and you might get a rainforest pop up. So you get some weird stuff happen. Those breaks in the landscape would reduce the amount of pollination that travels across the landscape, reduce the amount of genetic spread of the animals particularly. When you put in roads, animals are less likely to be able to get from A to B. So, you're more likely to fragment things, cause more inbreeding, more desiccation. So one of the worst things for a forest is to have all these edges. And when we put roads everywhere, there's forest edges everywhere, right? So it's like, if you just imagine a forest is tall and bushy on the top, when the sun hits it from directly above, no problem, stays cool underneath. But then the sun gets in the sides, yeah? And when the sun gets in the sides of the forest, it dries it out to a good distance within, yeah? It's just desiccating it. And so, putting roads in and so on is going to increase that. It's a very complicated topic, really.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah.
Bushfire mitigation in general. So first of all, what happened with the fires the last fire season? Why was it so big?
The 21st century human way of looking at it is the Indian dipole and the South Annular Mode. I think I said that right. They're two regular weather systems that come across Australia. They came at the same time, they were strong, and both of them inhibit rainfall. And they were both dry, and they both pushed weather to the east. So what happened is we got all this drying hot air. So it was like a tag team. We got all this drying hot air. It lit all these fires. Then the embers were pushed by the bloody fires up into the air and then dropped into further forests towards the coast. And then the fires were like, when you blow on a bushfire, on a campfire, and the fire jets out off your breath? It literally did that. You could see the wind hitting it and you could see the fire spraying into the environment. And then to make matters worse, because the weather systems were so strong, I'd say because climate change enhanced them, because you remember everything is there the same with climate change, but just more dramatic.
Right.
So climate change made it more dramatic. Australia's always had a dry wet cycle. If you look at the rainfall maps over 100 years, that's normal, but it's got more extreme. So the problem with this is there was so much wind blowing the smoke and the fire towards the east that all the smoke ended up over the Pacific. And during this whole event, I was watching the rainfall on Australia going, where the hell is the rain? Where's another metre of rain to put this out? Do something.
It lasted for a while.
It lasted way too long. And the rain was on the ocean because clouds of dust from the bushfires, they're going to make it rain. Pretty much anything you chuck in a cloud is going to make it sick. It's going to make it drop its water, basically.
So the clouds were in the ocean because of what you talked just before.
The smoke went to the ocean. Any clouds passing over just dropped their guts in the ocean and rained there.
What would you recommend in terms of bushfire mitigation other than bush regeneration?
Do you mean around here?
In Australia?
It's going to be different strategies everywhere. You've got to reduce the fuel load.
Can you define for our listeners the fuel load?
Oh, sorry. So there's been, for example, calls to go back to indigenous burning methods. So what I mean is if you go through a forest and you burn the fuel litter that's being produced over much shorter periods than would happen naturally, so then you've destroyed all of the leaves and sticks and stuff that are on the ground that are ready to keep the fire burning and spread it. So if you get rid of all of that with low-level fires that are controlled by people that have got, extinguishers and so on, it's a massive job, but we're going to have to do it. It's a massive job. It's like a multi-billion-dollar industry we have to set up that we're not really doing. So we're going to need, cool burns. That'll get rid of the fuel load. Then when we get a dry year, because they're going to keep coming and we don't want to look stupid and just go, oh, whoops, we're going to have to spend a lot of money on it. That's what it comes down to. It comes down to billions of dollars in a cool fire program we're going to have to do. When the hot years come back that are really dry, there'll be less fuel on the ground to light. There'll be smaller loads. Then the next thing we need is more infrared teams. We need like helicopters out there that can spot the ember lit fires and, you know, get these little spot fires put out. So we're going to need the old way and the new way to work together. This is really cheesy, but, you know, fire load reduction and high technology to spot the bloody embers, because one little ember could go and start a whole new massive fire, and it's just annoying. When we have the technology, we should be spotting it and catching it.
Now I'd like to talk about your discoveries, actually the subject at least of your study, about on Bio Precipitation and that really cool bacteria. How do you pronounce it again?
Pseudomonas syringae.
Pseudomonas syringae. All right. Why is it so important to discover the process that actually attracts rain?
The discovery of bioprecipitation is important because it would have some significant effect on the total rainfall, on particularly tropical and subtropical rainforests. And that has a big flow-on effect for everybody else, because so not only is it good to get that extra rainfall on those tropical type forests and subtropical, but because those forests help the other forests. So to take it really simply, if you look at the Earth, there's a heat belt more or less around the middle where the ocean's the hottest. And that's where the ocean evaporates from, right? And there's all this climatological stuff that's easy to understand about this. But basically, the water evaporates off the equator, goes up and starts moving outwards, and then it rains. And then it comes back up, and then it rains, and it gets out to the poles.
Right.
When you have good tropical forests, they're the first line to catch that water, not the ocean. And the tropical forests catch the water because they've got bacteria that catch it. They've got dust and pollen and all this biological material floating around off the top of the forest. All of that juice, all of that stuff that the forest flicks out catches the water. Because water sticks to anything, right?
Yeah.
But it really likes sticking to that bacteria. And so you imagine that you've got this well of water that evaporates off the equator and then rains down towards the poles and then sets as ice and so on, becomes part of the ocean. You don't want to miss any of this part. You don't want the ocean to steal the water, because it will. So at the moment, the ocean takes 71.8% of the surface of the Earth, and it takes just under 79% of all the water. The ocean takes more water than it covers the percentage of the Earth of, because the ocean produces its own stinky stuff. Like, you can smell the ocean, right? Anything you chuck in the sky makes it rain. The ocean's pretty good at making it rain.
Wow.
Yeah. So forests, like the Amazon and the rainforest and so on, they're chucking out all sorts of stuff just by default. You know, just pollens and so on, like I said, bits of plant material. But then they also have evolved with this bacteria that I have no idea, I haven't figured out how this works, but they have tested it scientifically, and they know that when it rains, this bacteria flies. So it flies off the forest, it gets up into the clouds, and it's electrically charged all over its body. It's dramatic in its effect, and it sticks water molecules to itself. So this bacteria's body is covered in electrically charged spirals that are the perfect shape. You know how water's negative and positive on each end? Like, water's like, that's how it all sticks to itself, because it's all negative, positive, right? So that's how it makes balls. That's how you get a water droplet, because it's electrically charged. So this bacteria has all these spirals wrapped around its body, and the water gets stuck to it. Now, the difference between water being a gas, or water being a liquid, or water being ice, is how much it's vibrating as a molecule. If you grab a molecule and hold it still, it's going to vibrate less. You got me?
Yeah.
If that's heat being lost.
Okay.
If you take if this is a molecule hot and I grab it, it's going to turn into liquid. If I really hold it still, it's going to turn to ice. The Pseudomonas force the water to become ice and make it rain. It's amazing, but it's so well studied, it's a joke. They've done it in labs with artificial clouds, and they've pumped this stuff into it and made it rain in artificial clouds. Yeah. I've got it in a cupboard. It's bloody expensive, but you can put like a micro droplet of it in a tank of water, cold water, has to be cold already, because it's got to grab this vibrating molecule and make it sit still, right?
Yeah.
So it's not too strong. So the water's got to be kind of cool already, and you can grab it and stop it. You got me?
Yeah.
So You can put a drop of it in a bottle of water and it just goes and sets into solid ice. You get a block of solid ice.
Just one drop.
It's insane. It's in one of my videos.
Yeah.
So the here's the crunch. This was discovered in 1982. There was 2 papers published. That year, I'm pretty sure it was an American guy, patented it and started selling this stuff to snow companies, the resorts in Europe and so on. So you know those big snow machines you see at resorts? Next time you're at one, ask them if they're putting Snowmax in it. So it's $2,000 a box. It's this bacteria reduced down.
You gotta love patents, eh?
Well, the commercial people figured it out first. Yeah.
But it also means that, I mean, it gives more importance to forests and more arguments as to why it's bad to log forests.
Yeah.
To understand that forests attract rain.
Yes, and you know how I was talking about this effect? The rain gets passed from forest to forest. That's in my video on Bio Precipitation. You can see it happening. You can see it happening. You go, oh wow, that rain came from the Congo forest and then it rained on the Amazon. And then it rained from the Amazon, some of it went to North America and it rained there. And then it went from there and it went to Japan.
Yeah.
It's like, this is cool. So, but you know what isn't cool is we're not that smart yet at predicting how the earth works, you know. And if we cut a section of forest out here that was meant to pass the water over there, you know what I think is going to happen? When you turn this into a desert, this water is going to fly over the ocean. And the ocean's going to say, I'll have you. And it'll spit out all of its salts and, you know, phytoplankton materials.
Absolutely.
And it'll take the water. And we're going to, so the more we cut down, the more percentage will end up in the sea. That's my prediction.
Yeah, and logging, I mean, all this ecology stuff, and logging is one of them, is definitely, these are global issues. And countries are not good at working together, especially on things that are hindering economy, as we call it. But I looked into it a little bit. There's things happening. For example, Norway banned deforestation in 2016. And it's good because the stats say that in 100 years, all rainforests could be wiped out if we continue at this rate. Norway also gave $1 billion to Brazil so that it preserves the Amazon.
I think they did the same with Indonesia.
Right. So this is action on an international level to try and work together. Poland has the last pristine ancient forest of Europe, and the EU is trying to fund them to preserve their forests. Not working very well, but they're trying. What is Australia doing with the Daintree and the Tarkine? Because they started logging the Tarkine again recently.
Look, the situation in Tasmania is pretty rough.
Okay.
You know, like it's you can see it from 2 perspectives. You go there, you'll see some of the best forest in the whole country. Like, you'll see that, and the most expansive, and that's the problem. Is, you know, government people are going to go to Tassie, and logging interests that are already there that are putting money into it, they're going to look at that and go, yeah, there's all this ancient forest, but look how much there is. You know, like, it's, so they just say there's so much, why can't we just have a little,
right,
we have a little nibble?
Yeah.
That's the problem with Tasmania, man. It's just like, it's a hotbed. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to finish this interview with 1, 2, 3 little more philosophical questions. First of all, what we're doing with bush regeneration, all this stuff we just talked about, there's an aspect of it where we somehow play God with the bush. We try and understand and then control to mitigate our own impact on this world, and then say this can live and this can't. What would you have to say about that?
Oh, it's an easy decision to make. It's only from lots of experience that you can make it, though. You go into it, you see, first of all, you have to know how this behaves. So if I see a small patch of that in the forest, I need to know that it's what it's going to do in the next 10 years and the overall effect it has. So you look at the weeds that are there, you look at the natives that are there, and you look at what the forest is trying to do. You don't play with it too much. You go, well, these are the species the forest is bringing up here. These are the ones that are surviving, and here's a watercourse. This is what it used to be here. This is meant to be a watercourse. This has been silted in by cows or whatever. And you go, you enable the forest rather than reconstructing the whole thing. You look at, you just try to enable the natural processes for the best outcome for the most species. Because what the thing is weeds will probably interact with a couple of species. You'll see some pigeons eating canthers or so on, but they won't flesh together into that relationship that is created over millions of years. This is really hard to get. Like if you think about something like, let's say the fig trees in the rainforest, they've been around for so long that their relationship with the wasp that pollinates them, every single species has its own wasp now. Like they've changed together, and and there'll be frog species that are only gonna put their eggs in the divots in that fig tree, and it's just like it's a headache basically. That like So you allow what's going to create the most tolerance and intermeshing and support. And weeds, generally the problem with weeds is they don't allow that. They just want to take over everything.
So there is such a thing as an approach where you're working with nature. It does exist.
There's a few different approaches with bush regeneration. If there's a bit of forest there with some weeds and some natives, and you're an experienced bush regenerator, you should be able to look at it and go, hey, I'm going to help you to be what you want to be again. Because the weeds were never going to let that happen. But if you take out the weeds, the rainforest will stitch itself back together. And it's amazing to watch. As long as there's 10 species to start with, other things are going to come back. But it won't happen like that if you let the big camphor laurel stay in there and the lantana. They'll always suppress the biodiversity and the complexity and the maturity. They'll never let it happen. So there's that. But then you're in situations sometimes where there's nothing left. And that's where you basically have to fabricate an ecosystem. And the best way to do that is just to create a diverse, tolerant canopy that will allow for succession, allow for the forest to shape itself. So you might put in 100 species, but the forest might then stabilize the microclimate, start to return to the soil moisture and so on of what it's meant to be. And then you might find that it doesn't even want any of your species. It might just want to go back to having, strangler figs and white bouillon running the place. And they'll come back if you put the conditions back.
We're not very good, naturally speaking, as human beings, as in letting nature do its thing rather than controlling. One easy example is the leaf blower. So it is actually really good for nature to have the leaves there decomposing. But we invented the leaf blower. It's not a natural behavior for us to work with nature and trust nature and let it do its thing. Which is also why I was asking you that question. But you're saying there's a way with more knowledge, more willingness to understand nature, to understand how to work with it.
Yeah. The more you know about the contributing variables, the more you're going to be able to make an informed decision.
Yeah.
So if you look at, to add to that, what I said before, you'd say, what is the natural ecosystem in the area? What does it look like? How many species are in it? What is this introduced weed? How is it behaving in this ecosystem? So you say, it's come in and it's excluded everything else. You go, well, that's not very good. And then you go, oh, it's poisonous and it's actually killing organisms in the creeks and so on, which, by the way, camphor's, there's scientific talk that it's actually poisonous, safrole molecule. So you'd say, what's the ecosystem meant to be? Is it being suppressed? And how do I do the least harm and the most good in mediating this? Yeah. It's you need to know a lot. And
you may be wrong, but that's the objective anyway.
yeah, you're going to get things wrong.
How do we get people involved in loving the forest, that we actually breathe?
I'd have a pretty simple answer. I mean, beyond watching, David Attenborough, is just to take the responsibility in your own circle of friends to be the guy or the gal that says, we went to the pub last week. This week, I'm going to invite everyone to go on a forest hike. And I'm going to be considerate that everyone's it's going to be the right length for the right people. That I'm going to actually pack extra food to make sure everyone's comfortable and doesn't regret it. I'm going to be considerate about if people get bitten by mosquitoes, if I do or I don't. And you're going to think, how am I going to create a good experience that they're going to want to do again? Because people love what they know, right? So I think people need to know the forest, which means they've got to spend time there, which means whoever is most into it in your circle of friends, whoever's most into it, they're the one that should be bringing people back into contact with it, because it's worth doing. But yeah, somebody's got to kick it off and say, oh, we'll do this on Saturday.
Going and spending time in the forest, basically.
Step one.
Yeah, step one.
You've got to know it to love it, and then everything else can go from that.
Reforest Now, what are the services you offer?
We produce scientific resources. We provide opportunities for businesses and from all scales, all the way up to Ecology, you'd say, from the quaint two-man business that wants to just donate a few trees a month. So yeah, we do some science. We provide opportunities for businesses to align themselves with something positive, be recognised and make a contribution. We connect ourselves through various social media networks to provide opportunities for people to directly contribute and be recognised. So, for example, we did this massive nursery upgrade recently.
Yeah.
Very serious amount of, work and funding. End of the video, we listed the names of every single person that paid for it. So it's like, so that at least they know if they chucked in $100. I'm like, no, man, we actually spent it there. That was you, So opportunities for people all around the world. Let's see.
Your clients are landowners as well. They call you to plant on their land.
Yeah, we find landowners, they don't usually pay for anything when it comes to tree planting. Occasionally we find someone generous who wants to contribute, but a lot of the time we just say, no, just as long as you prepare the area for us and it's a good site, that'd be really great. And then we give them trees for free by the tens of thousands, and that's coming from the donors' money. So the landowners, we're trying to reduce the number of them we work with, have bigger sites that are going to be more, like I said, the bigger the better.
Yeah.
So you're going to get more water and more species and more food, more animals are going to go live there. Better to just, So we do all that. We obviously do all the seed collection, the nursery propagation, all the construction. That's all jobs, Like I mentioned at the start of the interview, there's quite a lot of different jobs in Rainforest now. And then we support some people that work completely externally. So they depend on us for income, but they're people who have their own businesses or so on. But so I don't know, like, of all the things we do, the most important thing to me is employment. It's kind of what I'm obsessed with, is how to get more people getting paid to do this. Because, there's a lot of worse things to be doing,
Absolutely. So you've heard Maximo, www.reforestnow.org.au, and click donate. They need it to hire people and to plant more trees. And I'd like to give you 1 minute, as we do at the end of each episode of FutureSeeds, to look directly at the camera and speak directly to our listeners if you want to send a message to the world.
All right. Well, look, I suppose my message to the world is we're living in an age where a hell of a lot more people than we realize are living through the internet and are thinking through the internet. But we're still just people, and we still have an internal reality. And your internal reality is way more important than what you see going on outside of you. All of that will change if you fix your internal reality. And what I mean by fix your internal reality is if you're upset about climate change, if you're worried about what's happening in the planet, stop worrying and do what you think you should do. Whether it's donating to a group or helping a group actively, I don't worry about climate change. The people who work with me don't worry about climate change because, you know, if you're looking after a sick relative, it's important that you're there. It's not important that you win. It's important that you're a human. It's important that your heart's in the right place, and that's enough. And nobody can ask more of you than that. So so don't worry about what's going on outside. Worry about what's going on inside, and you know, run your own race.